Hello, my name is Daniel, and you're listening to the Engineering Success Podcast, episode 57, the premier engineering career podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening in this week. We have a great interview ahead, but before we get into that, I need to give a couple of shout outs. First of all, shout out to you for listening to the podcast and for supporting. We're approaching 30,000 views on our most watched video on YouTube. Why is the engineering dropout rate so high? So that's pretty exciting that we have a video that's that popular. So thank you guys for your support. And if you came to listen to this episode because of that, we have a lot more great topics that we cover in this podcast. We're mainly focused on helping you grow your engineering career by interviewing experienced engineers who've had different career trajectories and learning from them on how they got to where they are. Now, I would be remiss to also go without thanking our top tier supporters of the podcast, Leroy Jenkins and John Ott. Thank you both for your financial support of the podcast. $10 a month gets you a shout out at the beginning of every single episode of the podcast. And Leroy Jenkins and John Ott, you are my top tier supporters that are doing that. With that support, I'm able to keep my website intact, www.engringsuccess.com. And I am able to be emailed at my email address, daniel@engringsuccess.com, where you can contact me if you're interested in being on the show, if you're interested in a promotional item, which I have actually been approached about a sponsorship. More info to come on that soon. But yeah, if you want to contact me, that's the best way to contact me, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, though. Fair warning, if I don't know you, I may not accept your LinkedIn connection request. I usually keep that to people I know in person. Now, I have promised that I would read out the 5-star reviews of the podcast on the podcast. So let's do that. So I got a 5-star review from the Drop In CEO, which I imagine is my former guest of the podcast, episode 55, Deb Coviello. It's titled Intellectual and Engaging. This podcast takes you on a journey of engineering leadership, career transitions, and teases out the most amazing insights for the listeners. Content is both informative and also creates an experience that engages listeners to think about their own career journey and choice. The journey of an engineer was once thought limiting, but in this case explores the infinite possibilities. Thank you so much, Drop In CEO. And you can leave me a 5-star review yourself on Apple Podcasts, and I'll make sure to read it out. Next one is from Jeremy Allen TU. Fantastic podcast. Fantastic podcast. Could not recommend this podcast enough for anyone looking to engineer their own success. Daniel is an engaging host that brings on great guests that make for very informative episodes. Thank you so much, user Jeremy Allen TU. Next one, Ryo Bomb says informative and funny. Daniel has a passion for helping others find their way, and it shows in his podcast. Very interesting and helpful topics are discussed. Worth a listen if it's your first time. Thank you so much, Ryo Bomb. And then the last one, best advice for aspiring engineers from Mikey Dahl. It's clear that Daniel is very passionate in his goal of helping you, the listener, achieve engineering success. He derives much of this from personal successes and failures and looks to bring in guests and provide the widest range possible regarding knowledge and skill set. A must listen. So yeah, thank you so much for the 5-star reviews. If I get any more 5-star reviews, I'll make sure to read them out on the podcast. So if you want to be shouted out, you want to write in a podcast review, I'll make sure to read it on the podcast. But okay, without any further ado, let's get into our great interview of Melissa Drake. Hello, my name is Daniel, and you're listening to episode 57 of the Engineering Success Podcast. And today I am joined by a wonderful guest. My guest on today's podcast is an accomplished engineer. She's a teacher. She's an advocate for traditionally underrepresented groups in STEM. She is all the things. Melissa Villegas Drake is a graduate of New Mexico State University, where she obtained her Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Electronics Engineering. She has held multiple roles as an engineer, including working on the Space Shuttle Program, cool, and she's also had her second career, as I alluded to earlier, as an educator teaching engineering to high school students aspiring to a career in engineering. Now, one thing that has been so consistent for Melissa is her advocacy for minority representation in engineering, and it'll be a big theme in our conversation today. While in school, she became involved with the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, or SHPE. And after starting her career, she continued her involvement and eventually became the national president of that organization. Wow! Melissa's newest adventure is her efforts to get more girls and women into tech careers. She and another colleague revived the Girls in Tech chapter in Phoenix, and her main goal is to inspire individuals to begin their career in tech. She's also a coach to a first robotics team of a group of Girl Scouts. She's a formal volunteer for the Girl Scouts, and she's an ambassador of the Google Group of Women Techmakers and was recently recognized as one of Phoenix Magazine's Great 48 Phoenicians. Melissa is such a wonderful ambassador for the engineering community, and I am so grateful that she has offered her time to share her journey today. Melissa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. It's Friday. It's a good day here in Charlotte. How are things going for you over there in Phoenix?
It's going to be a really nice day in Phoenix. Our high will be 75. So we're
Nice.
definitely going to be outdoors after this.
I am jealous. I think it's like 30 something in Charlotte. Let me press my button. Oh, that's no, that's just the cloud button. That's not the weather. That's the little button to sync my computer to the cloud. I thought it was weather. Now, something I'm going to catch you off guard here. So something you don't know about me is that you and I have been on the opposite side of a couple of rivalries recently. I am not from Charlotte. I'm actually from the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. So I'm a big fan of two sports teams, the Dallas Mavericks and the Texas Rangers. So I just want to say Diamondbacks and the Suns, very wonderful organizations. I hope you have no animosity towards me as a fan of the team that's played against your team in some couple big series recently.
Oh, no. No, I thought you were going to say Dallas Cowboys and then we would have had an issue.
Oh, I'm sad. I'm happy to say that I'm not a Cowboys fan. At least it's not my favorite team because that was embarrassing, huh? That was embarrassing. But I did
I'm
grow up.
from Texas.
Oh,
I'm from
really?
Texas, but I haven't been a Cowboy fan in years because I haven't lived in Texas for so long. I've been in Phoenix since 1996. So I've been a Cardinal fan, but then I jump around depending because I like quarterbacks.
Yeah,
So I used to be a big fan of the Broncos because of Peyton Manning,
yeah, of course.
and now I'm a big fan of the Cheeseheads because of Jordan Love.
Yeah, well, there's some cheeseheads in my audience, and you're probably a big fan because you got to see the Cowboys lose last weekend. So, yeah, good for you. I'm sure you enjoyed that moment. Well, I'm here and I'm enjoying our moment together on the podcast. And what I want to learn about you is how'd you realize that you wanted to study engineering yourself?
So it's a really simple story because when I was in middle school, they had these career days where they had somebody come and speak to us once a month. And the only one I remember, sort of really, is an engineer from the El Paso Electric Company, because I'm from El Paso, Texas. And I don't know what he specifically said, but I knew that I wanted to do what he did. And he was an electrical engineer. So ever since that time, I had it in my head, I'm going to do what he is doing right now. Because he just made it sound so exciting and so rewarding. And I don't remember what he said. I just know that it was him that inspired me. And when I was in high school, my math teacher was one of my mentors, and I would ask him, well, what do you think? Should I still keep doing the engineering thing? Because I really love the math thing. And he says, yeah, stick to the engineering. So I did.
That's cool. So it sounds like you had two really good advocates, or well, maybe one of them was an advocate, and one of them was maybe just an inspiration that were involved in you pursuing engineering. And I'm wondering if that has to do with why you are so passionate about advocacy yourself.
Yes. Um, I'm a big proponent of telling your story to inspire others, especially Latino students or any student in general. Because what I find is if you don't know what it's all about, then you don't have a choice about what your career choice will be if you don't know certain things about certain careers. So we try to teach about engineering really early. Even as an engineer, I did that. I went to different schools and talked about engineering because in order to grab kids, you have to grab them like when I was in middle school or younger.
Yeah.
It's hard to get them to transition or think of a career later in their youth.
Yeah, that makes great sense. And that's why I love this podcast. It's why I started the podcast is because I was really fortunate. I was really blessed that my dad was an engineer and he told me about it. But even then I didn't get it. I didn't get what engineers do. And my vision of what an engineer did was something like Steve Jobs in like a garage somewhere, or somebody, tinkering with things in a garage and making electrical things and stuff come together. And that's not exactly what engineers do. And I learned that in college pretty quickly. That's not exactly what engineers do. And so for you, you went to college at New Mexico State. So why did you end up choosing New Mexico State for college?
So when I was a junior in high school, I was able to get into a summer engineering program for a couple of weeks, and I really liked it. But when I applied for schools, I applied in different places like Texas and Louisiana. I didn't want to go far from home, but eventually I picked New Mexico State because it was right next door to Texas, and it was far enough away where I had to move out, but I could still go anytime I wanted.
Yeah. That's actually a really consistent recurring theme. It's for me, I went to San Antonio from Dallas Fort Worth because I wanted to be about close enough I could get home, but far enough that I could escape. And my last guest on the podcast, same thing. She went from New Jersey to New York, and then you went from Texas to New Mexico. That's cool. So
Mm-hmm.
what about that program that you chose there? So you chose a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical and Electronics Engineering. Was that tied to the power plant person that you met, or was there another inspiration for you?
No, I did some research, and with electrical engineering, you can apply that degree into many industries.
Yeah.
So I would have more opportunities for work if I stayed with Double E. And it was more an idea. I had absolutely no experience with anything electrical, okay? It was just like this fantasy I had. But then when we went to the engineering program, it was cool because they tried to give us a taste of some of the engineering classes. And I remember they gave us a calculator. It was an HP 15, and it's a programmable calculator. So they taught us how to program that during those 2 weeks, and I loved it. That was so, so cool. So one of the engineering curriculum requirements is coding. And so I enjoyed that. And then the other facets that they showed us did not turn me off from my dream.
That's cool. That's cool. Electrical is great. My dad's an electrical engineer. I almost went the electrical engineering route. I was even a member of IEEE. But
Mm,
but yeah, I even competed in their ethics competitions, but it wasn't until my junior year that my school lets you pick after your sophomore year. But I respect it. I definitely can't do electrical engineering is what I realized eventually. My friends took signals and systems and they just blew my mind when they talk about the concepts that they learned in those classes. So there's a lot of things to consider whenever you're choosing a college or choosing a major. You kind of talked about your things that you considered when choosing those things. What kind of things would you, in addition to those things, would you recommend that people that are considering engineering think about whenever they're going to school?
well, I mean, for me, math was my thing. So I know that I had to be doing well in math in high school in order for me to succeed in engineering. So it wasn't completely unreachable, so to speak, even though I didn't know specifics
Mhm.
about the degree itself. But I knew that I guess I had the qualifications in that respect. And then in high school, I took every college prep course I could take to get me ready. And that's the one thing about knowing early what you want to do, because when you're getting into high school, you can start taking the courses that you need for college prep.
Yeah.
And when you don't know that, I mean, it's okay because some students decide their senior year, hey, I want to become an engineer, and that's okay because you can go to community and take your basics and not pay as much money and move on to the harder classes at a higher university. Um, so it doesn't matter, it just takes a little longer. Um, but I think the earlier you know what to do, the better. But the other thing I say is just try it. If you don't know, just go for it, and you can always change your mind. It's better to try than not to try.
I agree 100%. And I think you hit on something really interesting there. You talked about the math and the math competencies, and I think you're so right, right? Even if you don't have the math and you don't have all the prereqs or stuff like that, if you're not all the way there yet, you can definitely go the community college route. But if you know you're going that route, one of the things I observed was the quickest way to get yourself behind or not being able to graduate in the 4 years that everybody says you need to do is math. If you definitely want to get yourself in a position to be able to get into engineering just from the jump, maybe get at least through pre-cal in high school. So if you have the option your senior year to choose between pre-cal and stats, you're going to take stats in college too, but that taking that pre-cal course and being able to go straight into calculus in college, or maybe even taking a calculus class in high school, will definitely set you up to be able to at least not be starting from behind. That's a
Yes,
good piece of advice.
and that's what I did. I took pre-cal, cal statistics in high school.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
definitely recommend that.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you took the prep classes in high school and you were pretty good at math. So I assume you were a pretty good student in high school. Did that transfer you for you whenever you got to college?
Uh, Not completely.
Mm.
So my freshman year, I did really well. I did pretty well. I think I had all A's and a B, and I was very disciplined. And I didn't know anybody. No one from my school went to the same college, so I had to meet new friends and stuff, and it was all good. I loved it, absolutely loved it. But then my sophomore year, I had been in a 4 year relationship that I started in high school, and it was a long distance thing. And I said, no, this isn't gonna work. I'm not good with long distance. So in the middle of sophomore year, I broke off the relationship, and my grades went downhill. I think I only passed 2 classes that semester. It was pretty bad because I always give this advice to my students also. Just be really careful with the first person you fall in love with, because that's going to hurt you the most, especially if you leave them. So that was really, really painful. And it was really bad because I did not want to be failing in college.
Yeah.
So my second semester, sophomore year, I got my act together and had been fine. But I never got to the point where I wanted to be an A student. And that's because the classes were really difficult. It's a completely different ballgame. But I wasn't going to give up. If I had problems like with physics, for example, I'd get a tutor, or with whatever class I needed help with. I never gave up. Um, with engineering, you have to have, I think, a C or better in the engineering classes. So I had to make sure that at least I got that. And then when I joined SHIP, that took a lot of my time. And that, in a way, I mean, it helped me a lot. SHIP has helped me a lot on my resume. And it helps because it developed my leadership skills and engineering skills. So my GPA wasn't the best, but I had SHIP there to help me in that respect. And it's been pretty good.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think it's a hard thing for a lot of people, right? Is they're so used to being like the best of the best in high school. It's just like it's like the engineering trope is some people are not the best of the best, but a lot of people are like the top of their class and they get to engineering and they're like, "Oh, this is hard." And then they have a 2 year relationship or 4-year relationship end their sophomore year. For me, it was a 2-year long distance relationship that ended my sophomore year. Same thing.
Oh,
My grades tanked. So very similar stories here. But yeah, you don't need a perfect GPA in engineering school. You don't need it. You don't need it. So what you do need though is to take away the lessons that you learn from engineering school, which is learning how to solve problems and the other things that you learn. So what about you? What were the biggest what class from college was the most applicable for you? What class did you enjoy the most or did you take away the most from in your career?
there were so many things I loved in school.
Yeah.
I loved going to school. Um, but the ones that carried me forward in the different careers that I've had besides engineering has been speech,
Nice.
writing, and then the technical one would be circuits because I still kind of use that when I've taught engineering in the past. I've used it and I sometimes use it with robotics. So basic circuits is always useful for anyone, I would think.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that I still use quite a bit.
Cool. Well, you talked a little bit about how it's useful for for anybody's career. Why don't we talk about your career? So we got through college. Let's talk about your career. So what first of all, while you were in college, did you do any internships or anything like that?
I did. So it
Cool.
took me 5.5 years to graduate. I had one internship with Hughes Aircraft. They were
Nice.
working on submarine weapon systems. And then after that, I did 2 summers and a co-op with Jet Propulsion Lab. And
Wow.
one of those tours was doing making a clock for the space shuttle. So that was fun.
That's cool. So you're actually not the first guest on this podcast to have worked at Hughes Aircraft. You're the One of my other guests also worked at Hughes Aircraft, Steve Check of
Mm.
episode 54. So very interesting. Now he went on, and like you going on to go into education, he went on to do finance. So I
Mm.
guess Hughes Aircraft to not engineering pipeline is strong. Yeah. So okay, so you mentioned, sorry, I digress. I get excited about these connections. It's all a tangled web that we weave, right? So you mentioned that you got to do a clock for the space shuttle. Now, then you graduate and you start working for the United Space Alliance, or I think it was called Rockwell Space Operations at the
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
at first it was Rockwell, and then they changed the name to United Space Alliance. I was there for 7.5 years working as a contractor for the Space Shuttle Program. And 7.5 years is a long time when you look back at it, because a lot of people don't stay that long in their jobs anymore.
Yeah.
And it was very fun. I had a really great group of supervisors and colleagues that I still keep in touch with today. Some are still working at NASA. So it was definitely a fun program to be in. I met my husband at NASA.
Wow.
So, yes. So I'm very grateful that I didn't end up in California and I ended up in Houston, because things would have been quite different. But in Houston, what I did was project management, and it was basically releasing the data for each mission cycle so that the astronauts and mission control could train. So we were like the red tape, I guess you could say, that you had to go through to get all the data approved before they could use it
Interesting. So why did you need that red tape? What was the importance of guarding that data?
for safety.
Okay.
You wanted to make sure that you got everything correct. So we would go through a couple of iterations of the data
Mhm.
before it actually went to mission.
Interesting.
So the crew can start training with one version of the
Uh-huh.
data, and then they'll have some fixes,
Uh-huh.
update the database, and then we have to release it again. before they go to launch.
That's cool. Cool. So you mentioned, you hinted a little bit earlier that you wanted to be in California, but you ended up in Houston. What was that like for you? I mean, I know that you grew up in Texas, so maybe going to Houston wasn't the scariest thing, but I mean, it's a new city, it's a new part of the town, and it's a big city. What was that like for you choosing to work in Houston?
So I really wanted to go to California because I had family there and I had already established some roots because I had been there, lived there 3 times already. So I really wanted to live in California. But then when I went to Houston, I was like, okay, well, I guess California is not in the cards. That's fine. Um, I had never been before. I was hired without an on-site interview, so I didn't get to see the city. Um, Actually, no, that's not true. I did get to see the city. No, they did fly me in now that I think about it. And I stayed with one of my friends from California who had family in Houston. So I'm like, oh, it's not so bad. It was raining. So I'm like, I can take the rain. It's fine. So then when I moved, it was so green because West Texas is desert
Yeah.
and Houston was very, very green. It rained a lot.
Yeah.
We got tropical storms and hurricanes. It was so completely different for me, but I adjusted and it was fine. It was um, the weather wasn't so much the thing for me. It was the work environment and the friends I had made.
Yeah. That makes sense. I'm so glad that you took the leap. A lot of people I feel like are afraid to go to new cities because it's uncomfortable for them. But what I found in my career, and it sounds like the same for you in your career, is whenever you take that leap and you're willing to explore the new city, then you make those friends, and then you're able to find community, and it ends up working out good for you in the way that you want it to be. So I always encourage people, especially I work in construction, and people are afraid to travel because they don't want to go to a construction site. I'm like, okay, how can you work for a construction company and never ever go to a construction site? I don't understand it. You gotta go where you gotta go where your passion is, where what you do
Yes.
happens, right? So for
Hmm.
you, one of your passions was Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. So when I look at your LinkedIn, uh, there's a timeline thing here where you were still working at Rockwell, and then you started getting more and more involved with Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and then eventually you became the national president of Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers.
Yes.
How did that happen?
So I just moved up the ranks. I don't know why it seemed kind of easy for me. I don't know because I was always an officer except for 1 year of my ship career, and that's when I moved to Houston. But I was always involved in a committee, or if I was not in a committee, I was an officer. And I became the regional vice president for ship, so I got to sit on the national board. And actually, as a student, as a college student, I also got to sit on the national board, and I
Wow.
loved it. Those experiences were really cool, and everyone got along really well. We were all a bunch of Latinos that brought the culture as well as the engineering aspect to the engineering society. So I wanted to keep going with that. And then when the opportunity came about, um, I ran for president because I felt that there were some changes that needed to be made within the organization and we needed to be more businesslike, more professional. So that's what made me decide to do it. And I still don't believe that I did it because it happened so long ago.
Yeah. So what was the moment when you realized that you had to leave? Were you forced to leave NASA to pursue it once
No,
you became president? No, you weren't. Okay.
no, I had to get their okay to be able to run for office because I'd be
Yeah.
traveling with. So they
Yeah.
were fine with it. So I did both jobs, and it was like having
Wow.
2 jobs at the same time. So it's really difficult. And at that time, actually, my husband and I were deciding to leave, and he left before I did. He came to Phoenix first,
Okay.
and then I followed 3 months after because I just could not live without him.
Yeah.
So I moved out here. So my second year as ship national president, I was here in Phoenix. So that was really good because I was doing it full time.
Okay.
And it took me that amount of time to find my next job anyway. So that kind of worked out well. But I had to travel to LA every month because our corporate office was there and I managed the staff. I was doing the CEO job at the time. So it was really difficult because I was not only just the president of the organization, I also had to manage the staff. So it was
Wow.
a really great experience because I just kind of got thrown into the water
Yeah.
and I either had to sink or swim. It was a very stressful volunteer position,
Yeah.
but it was great in that I learned a lot and gained many friends, which I am still friends with, and I'm still part of the organization. And I owe the organization a lot because, as I said before, that's where I got to develop my organizational skills and my leadership skills. So I
Yeah.
will never leave SHIP.
Mm. So for my audience that's not as familiar with it, I think the name pretty well explains what SHIP is, but what does SHIP do for engineering students or for engineering professionals? What do people get out of being involved in SHIP?
So if people don't know, um, in 1974, a group of engineers got together and they created the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers because they wanted to have an organization to help Latino students succeed in engineering, provide opportunities, mentorship, training, that sort of thing. So slowly, SHIP started forming these leadership trainings, and they would teach you basic stuff like how to do a presentation, for example, which is really hard for a lot of people, especially if you're an introvert. And I was an introvert, believe it or not. I was voted shyest in my high school class, which is totally unbelievable. People laugh when I tell them that. Um, but one of the leadership trainings that I had to do as a student president was do a presentation about one of the SHIP programs. And it was terrifying, but it was great. I mean, once you get through that major hump and keep going, you just keep accelerating and progressing and getting better and better at all of this stuff. And what I like about SHIP is that it doesn't just give you opportunities technically, it helps you with your soft skills
Yeah.
and your leadership skills. And I tell people often that I get of those soft skills, I've obtained them from SHIP. Yes, my companies have provided that, but not into the greatest capacity that SHIP has done. So I think if you become a leader within SHIP, that's the biggest benefit you can have. But a lot of students just go and to the conference, which is held once a year when they have tons of workshops on different topics, professional development, also for our professional members. And the career fair is the biggest thing because that's where they can find an internship or a permanent job. And I don't really know how many companies attend that career fair anymore, but I know it's humongous.
Yeah.
So if you're an engineer and you want to find a job, you go there. You go to that conference.
Yeah. Cool. And I think it's a phenomenal organization. I don't know if there was a SHIP chapter at my university, but I know we had a NISB chapter, we had a Swede chapter. So all of the organizations that exist to help underrepresented populations in engineering. I am a massive supporter of them because the more diverse our teams are, the better our teams are. That's just a fact. I believe it
Yes.
wholeheartedly, and we need more engineers from all different kinds of backgrounds because better backgrounds build better projects, and I believe that 100%. So thank
Yes,
you
I
for your
agree.
involvement. Yeah, so thank you so much for your involvement with SHIP and for sharing a little bit more about that. So you mentioned that you left NASA to be more involved with SHIP, but also because your husband needed to relocate to Phoenix. It must have been a pretty difficult experience leaving what was probably a really cool job. But then you've
Mhm.
landed. You landed at Motorola Semiconductor Products or on Semiconductor.
Mhm.
and you were a product engineer for them. So how'd you find your way into on semiconductor?
So it was really hard to find a job in Phoenix being a product manager of NASA because no one does what we do.
Yeah.
No other industry does the same kind of thing. But when I was interviewing at Motorola, my one of my interviewers recognized that a lot of the stuff I did was what a product engineer in the semiconductor business would do. She was able
Nice.
to parallel those two positions. So she hired me. And it was a great, great job. I loved it because the product engineer gets to interface with everybody else, the designers, the testers, QA. So you have to pull all those people together to get the product out. So
Hmm.
it was a brand new thing for me. And my first couple of months, I interviewed everybody that I was going to have to work with and
Hmm.
learn about their job because it was a new industry for me. So I did that and I took tons and tons of notes about what everybody did. And I learned quickly. And I'm a person that really likes to interface with other people, even though I was an introvert. Now I'm an introvert, extrovert as a result. Um, but I love that because I was able to touch on every part of the release process for a product. And I was responsible for that. And it was nice because I wasn't their manager.
Hmm.
So, I didn't have to deal with management type problems.
Hmm.
I had to deal with getting the product out at a certain
Yeah,
time.
that's cool.
So I really enjoyed that job. Unfortunately, it was short lived because 9/11 happened. And for some reason, it did impact a lot of industries, including ours. So
Uh,
half of my group, including my boss, and my fourth year working with the industry, got laid off. So that had never happened to me before. And when you get laid off for the first time, it's really not a pleasant experience to say
yeah, I
the
can imagine.
it's a real bummer, especially when they keep telling you, "Oh no, your group is fine. You're not going to be affected at all," and mm-mm, that was not the case. So the company had this uh, building outside of the company where they would have us come in and we could do different skills like interviewing skills and resume writing skills. So they let us do that for a couple of weeks and then we started interviewing. But I was like, I really don't want to come back to this industry if it's going to go up and down like this because I heard that a lot.
Uh-huh.
So I told my husband, I said, you know what? I don't think I want to go back into engineering just yet. I want to uh, see what I can do in education. I want to be a sub and see how that goes. So I became a long-term sub. I came in the middle of a semester, taught eighth grade math, four different math classes, and a reading class. So I had to prepare for five different classes, and I didn't know that that was a no-no, that you don't do that,
Yeah.
especially as your first year as a teacher, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
And the principal really liked me. He gave me a book. He hired me over Christmas break. He says, read this and just be ready to go. So I did it. And I can tell you that I was so dumbfounded. I had no idea how hard it was to be a teacher. I mean, you don't know until you do it.
Yeah.
And the kids can be really awful. And they were really, especially seventh and eighth graders, they're just bad. But what I had done was in the middle of the semester, I had, no, actually at the end of the semester, I said, this is the career that I want to have because it was very rewarding. And I had written a long email to the whole staff and I said, I can't believe you guys do this. This is unbelievable. And I'm going to do it myself because I think it's such an important job and you do make an impact. Um, it may be a little impact, but I mean, it's important. So when I was an engineer, I think I told you I would go and talk at different schools about engineering to kids, and I loved that. And that's what kind of inspired me to try the teaching thing. So I taught for almost 15 years
Wow.
math. I got to teach some engineering and some coding, some IT. And of course, the technical classes I love to teach. Math, not so much because the kids don't want to be there. They really don't want to learn math. So it was a very challenging subject to teach
Yeah, I can
because they
imagine.
just not did not want it because I had the lower level kids and I also had the special ed kids. So they really did not want to be there.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
very challenging, super, super challenging.
Yeah.
But I
So
loved it. I loved it.
yeah, and it's so hard, right? Whenever the kids they can't see it in context. They don't understand why the math is important because they don't see how it's applied, which which is I assume why you taught for a long time, but then eventually you got to doing what you do now, which you're involved with girls in tech, where that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Where you're actually showing girls where that math becomes applicable. So how'd you get involved with girls in tech?
So when I was teaching at a charter school, I had a big break in between, and there was a conference downtown because I worked close to downtown. And Girls in Tech was having this 2-day conference. And I emailed the CEO and I said, hey, I'm a teacher. I can't afford to pay this huge conference fee. Can I go just for a day and pay this? And she said, yeah. So I'm like, cool. So I went, and it was a small conference. I was so used to the big ship engineering conferences, but this one was small, maybe 100 people. And they had CEOs or people that own their own companies speak to the people that were present. And I loved it because they were telling you their successes and failures, and they were telling their story. And I said to you before that I love when people tell their story because I think that's where you learn the most.
Uh,
So I fell in love with the organization and I talked to the CEO and I said, hey, is there a chapter in Phoenix? She's like, no, but you can revive one or revive it if you wish. And they said, we'll pair you with somebody else so you don't have to do it by yourself. And I didn't hesitate and I said, sure. So I've been doing this since 2017. And what we do is provide different programs for younger generation and older generation, not just females, to get interested in tech. A lot of people, as I said before, don't know the benefits of tech and why is it so interesting and beneficial to have a career in tech. So that's what we do. We provide the message, we provide some professional development, we do hackathons, design thinking workshops, startup weekends. We do all of that. The additional thing we do is we sponsor a FIRST robotics team. And do you know what FIRST stands for, by the way?
I know what it stands for
I'm
because
gonna
it's on
test
my
you.
screen right here, right in
Oh
front
well,
of me.
that's
I'm
cheating.
reading it. Yeah, I'm
That's
gonna
cheating.
cheat. It is for inspiration and recognitions of science and technology. Thank you for
There you
writing
go.
that on my note sheet for me. So tell me more about what FIRST is. Yeah.
So first, I actually got involved with FIRST when I was a first year teacher. And this physics teacher said, I'm going to start a robotics club. And I said, oh, I need to do a club because I'm a teacher now, so I should be part of a club. And little did I know that first year teachers, you really shouldn't get involved in a club. You really shouldn't because you're just learning the ropes of how to teach. So I essentially had two jobs. I had the math teacher part and then I had the robotics part. And the robotics part was massive. We had to build the robot in 6 weeks, raise about $9,000, and compete.
Wow.
That was so stressful. I got my
Hmm.
husband involved, my mother and her husband involved, because it was just a hard thing to do. And long story short, I did that for 7 years with my
Wow.
family. And it's very, very rewarding. Some of these kids still come back to me and uh, let me know how they're doing. But First is a really awesome program. They really have like 4 tiers from kinder going all the way to seniors in high school. So I did that top tier for 7 years, and then I did the next to the last one, which is FTC, First Tech Challenge, and I like that one better because it's less money, smaller robot, more time. So that's
Yeah.
what we're doing now. Is the girls I have right now are middle school and they're Girl Scouts from the Scottsdale area of Arizona, and they're just amazing because when you hit that bug and they love it, there's no stopping them. And that's the team I have now. They are just very motivated, and we only have 3 competitions. We've done our first one already, and they actually ranked first
Wow.
out of, I guess, 27 teams. I can't remember. We didn't make it to the state championship, but we have 2 more opportunities to make it. But that's the second year that I've been with this team, and they've gone, from night and day and changed so much and been really, really successful. And they're just little girls, and it's been tough because when they interface with the high school kids and adults in competitions, it's tough because some of them are not taken seriously because they're so little, and it's a problem, um, and you just have to be there for them and make sure that nothing happens as far as them getting hurt and feeling bad about not being old enough to be there, but that's not the case. I mean, everyone is different and has a different learning capacity. These girls are amazing for being so young. They're really smart. So
So, yeah.
it's been a great experience. So that's why I'm still doing it right now.
Cool. And thank you for doing it. I think my university chapter of ASME also volunteered to help a Girl Scout chapter that was doing a first
Hmm.
robotics competition. And I will tell you this, I showed up to help them one time and they're like, "All right, you're here to help them." And I said, "Okay, what do they need help with?" And then these little girls, they were just doing their own thing. They were doing engineering. They were coding robotics. They were assembling parts. They were prototyping. They were doing all these things. I'm like, don't need me. They know more. They know way more about. Sorry, they know way more about. They know way more about building a robot. Way more about programming a robot. Way more about this than I could ever know. I'll just be here and I'll be hands. I'll be hands. You want me to carry something? You want me to pick something? You want me to screw something in? I'll do that. But it's amazing what these little girls can do. And thank you for doing that and for helping them. And so we were talking a little bit about girls in tech. So who gets involved with girls in tech? Is it for women of all ages, or is it for little girls?
It's pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
The national organization or international organization, I should say, really focuses more on professional and
Mhm.
college, but we like to focus on all grades and professional and college. So we try to target every aspect of it, but we try to not do too much because we're all volunteers. I'm the only one that on the board right now. It's a working board, by the way. It's not a board that just makes decisions. They actually get their hands dirty and do stuff. And it's simple stuff half the time, but A lot of it is PR, promoting ourselves and our activities in social media, on the website, planning the events. I feel like I'm an event planner. That's like my fourth career because ever since I've been in SHIP, I've been planning events, fundraisers.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly doing that. So I'm an expert in that. I guess I could change careers if I wanted to eventually and become an event planner. Um, but essentially, that's what we do is plan events for all these entities. And it's tough to manage a group of 11 people and get the stuff done. And I recently read that if you can get a group of volunteer people to do stuff under you, then you're perfect for running your own business. And I've actually thought about that as well, just starting something, but I haven't quite crossed that bridge yet because I just only been retired a year and a half and I'm just kind of relaxing right now. But I would like to do something like that eventually.
It's cool. Yeah, you've had a really cool career. You had like I'd put it in, you say four careers. I'd say you had your engineering career, you had your teaching career, you had your girls in tech job that or I guess you say you're a volunteer, but you have girls in tech that you do now. What have you learned about yourself and about your relationship to engineering throughout your career?
I guess I like learning,
Yeah.
so I'll never stop learning stuff. I love that, and I still keep researching different things I don't know. Um, with the robotics part, this first year of this team, it was really only me for a long time. And typically, I have a handful of people helping me technically. And I didn't have that last year. And it was so difficult because I had to relearn a lot of stuff, do a lot of research, because I'm like, I don't remember mechanical engineering. That was way, way long time ago. I don't know how these
Yeah.
motors are supposed to work.
Yeah.
So it was cool because I got to relearn a lot of that tech stuff that I had learned years and years ago. And it's so hard because people tell you, well, you're an electrical engineer. You should know how to do this stuff. I'm like, no, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
You have to really apply it for it to stick in your head. And um, yeah, I had to relearn a lot of stuff last year. And I loved it. It was great. And I want to keep doing that. I want to keep learning new things and um, encouraging people to do the same.
Yeah. So, speaking of encouraging people, let's close with this. What advice would you give to a young person, or you can be more specific and say a young girl that's considering a career in engineering?
Do a lot of research. Make sure that you know what the career entails, what you have to study to get that career. And then if you do get your degree in that specific area, when you interview, this is one thing I didn't do, but it worked out for me. I was lucky. Ask a lot of questions about your what you will be doing at your job. Um, because I think you need to know that. And I was a little naive and I was like, okay, I'll be happy just working anywhere that has to deal with the Space Shuttle Program. I don't care what I do. But again, I got really fortunate and I ended up where I did. But I think I would have preferred to have something that was more hands on and more creative. What I went into was already created and I was just continuing on a cycle, mission after mission. So it started getting monotonous for me. So I need to have something where I'm creating, building. So if depending on what you want to do, if you want to be that person that creates, make sure that you ask your interviewer specific questions about what your job is going to entail. So
That's a
that
great
that's my big one.
that's a great takeaway. Thank you so much for sharing it. And Melissa, Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing your career journey and your advice. And thank you for being such a wonderful advocate for underrepresented groups in engineering because we need it as an industry. It's an industry that's getting better, but we're not there yet. We're not where we need to be, like many other
No,
industries.
no, we're not. But
Yeah.
thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And I'm going to listen to more of your podcasts and contribute. So you can keep going.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that. Hear that, everybody? Listen to the podcast and contribute. You heard it here from my guest, Melissa Drake, on episode 57 of the podcast. We'll catch you on the other side of the break. Thank you. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to that wonderful interview with Melissa Drake about her career and journey related to engineering. If you liked the episode, or if you didn't like it, which I don't know why you wouldn't, make sure to like, comment, subscribe down below. It really helps me out a lot. Share the video with somebody you like. Give it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you give a 5 star review, I will read it out on the next episode of the podcast. And also, please consider supporting the podcast on Patreon or Anchor/Spotify. I'd prefer it there. The fees are less. And again, you'll get a shout out at the beginning of every single episode of the podcast if you become a top tier supporter. Anyways, this was the Engineering Success Podcast. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll see you in the next one.
I miscommunicating. I just made a pilot, then they threw me on the stations. Now I'm not complaining. My thoughts get complicated. I cannot explain in lameness. Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries. Thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify. They put me on the station.